Hey everybody, this is going to be a fairly quick video because I occasionally get comments about this and it's with enough frequency that I'm getting tired of repeating myself about it, but I do get comments frequently enough where people are complaining about how I take games that are 4:3 resolution normally and I will correct them for the 16:9 aspect ratio. They never seem to have a problem with me scaling to 1080p, but they always have a problem with me correcting for the 16:9 aspect ratio. Because apparently just artificially increasing the size of the pixels isn't that big of a deal, but widening them is. I get it on some cases, some games it does look kinda rough, but for the most part it never ends up being that big of a problem because these games were already so low res that it didn't matter. I mean, think about it this way. This entire time you've been watching some Blakestone footage that I've actually scaled up to 1080p and I've corrected for the 16:9 aspect ratio. If I decided to go absolute pixel perfect and just show the footage exactly as it's recorded directly from the source, which in this case is DOSBox running at the original game's resolution, it would look like this. Now obviously that would be absolutely miserable to watch and nobody in their right mind would want to do that, so I scale it up to whatever resolution I'm outputting the video at, which is either going to be 720 or 1080p, usually 1080p. And that leaves black bars on either side of the screen like what you're seeing here. When I correct for the aspect ratio, I basically just widen the image slightly enough to where it removes the black bars. Now here's the thing, when you're looking at a DOS game for example, those generally didn't run in actual 4:3 resolutions. If you're talking about really old DOS games like say Blakestone or earlier games than that, they generally ran in 320x200, which is actually a 1:6 ratio, which actually scales up to 16:9 quite a bit more easily. The issue starts to arise when you actually get proper 4:3 or even 5:4 resolutions, which are more like 640x480 or 800x600 or something along those lines, and that's when you actually start to see some pretty severe widening of pixels, like in the case of, say, Castlevania, which did run in a 4:3 resolution, and which looks like this if you are just deciding to run it in the standard 4:3 aspect ratio without doing any sort of correction whatsoever. And like this if you decide to correct for the 16:9 aspect ratio. Obviously you can see that the pixels are quite a bit wider, and for some people that's apparently a deal breaker, but I've never really had a problem with it, and I don't see most people having a problem with it. Now funnily enough, when I first started making videos on YouTube, I actually did upload videos in the proper aspect ratio for whatever particular game it was, so if it was a 4:3 game, the video would be a 4:3 resolution. But I started to notice some pretty nasty problems with that due to the way YouTube processes videos. You see, YouTube videos are really not supposed to be 4:3 resolutions. They're supposed to be 16:9, preferably 720 or 1080p or higher resolutions than that. And thus, if you upload a video in a 4:3 resolution, it's not necessarily going to process correctly. Of course, a lot of that's going to depend entirely on what video format you're using and how YouTube deals with that and all the different encoding settings and such, but still, you might run into problems if you just upload a straight 4:3 video these days. So I upload in 720 or 1080p, but that brings with it another set of problems, namely the fact that if I leave the footage as is, then I've actually had instances where when I upload the video, it messes up the aspect ratio anyway, and it will actually cut off parts of the image because it perceived these black bars as just not being necessary to the video and just cut them off entirely, making the image just look absolutely terrible. Now of course you don't see that sort of thing when I upload videos, because when I upload a video, it doesn't go live until I've had a chance to look at it and make sure everything actually encoded properly and it's in the proper resolutions and everything like that before I let it go live. But after it did that a couple of times, I just decided to correct the video for the 16:9 aspect ratio regardless, and since then I haven't had a single problem uploading any videos. The only other way I could really deal with something like that is if I had some sort of border around the 4:3 footage so that it wouldn't cause any issues during the actual processing stage. Now of course I don't have any border images I can use right now, so I can only show it in the instances of games where they actually support it. So for example, in the case of Castlevania here, I'm running it through the Anniversary Collection, which has the option of using a frame around the image as opposed to just having the image on its own. So now you have a general idea of how that would look, and in fact I'm probably going to have to do something like that when I get around to reviewing certain DS games that I'm actually able to capture footage for, considering that they all run on multiple screens as opposed to just one screen only. So that's its own challenge, but as for just generally upscaling 4:3 to 16:9, I find that just the simplest and easiest solution for me is just to scale it up to 1080p and just expand the image so that there's no black bars on either side of the screen. Not only does that end up filling up the entire video, but it also looks better as far as I'm concerned, because I frankly hate having black bars on either side of the screen. Whether that be on the top and bottom, like say during cutscenes or if I'm watching a movie or something like that, or on left or right, like if I'm watching an old TV show or playing an old video game. Either way, I just find it personally irritating, so when I go to edit my videos, that ends up factoring in anyway, even though I was already doing this for the YouTube processing reasons anyway. So there you have it, folks. That's why whenever I do a video where the game in question doesn't actually render at a 16:9 aspect ratio, I correct it for that aspect ratio. And the simple fact of the matter is that no matter how many complaints I receive about that, I'm going to keep doing so until I have a much better alternative. Thanks for watching. See you all in later videos.